The judge did everything she was supposed to do. She revoked the bond at the end of the trial, as any judge would do. The clerk in the courtroom placed a hold upon my client, and then the jail released him. Now, what happened in between, I don't know. I can't say. All I can say is that he was released.
This is 27-year-old Octavius LaShun Atkins, a man whose life was taken in the middle of an ordinary red light. The Memphis robber who murdered him would be released from prison because of a mistake. On the evening of June 19, 2020, Memphis police responded to a shooting at Shelby Drive and Neely Road in Memphis, Tennessee. When they arrived, Octavius was already dead, while a 49-year-old man was injured. As they scrambled to find the responsible person, it didn't take them long to locate Anthony Green, who would eventually be convicted for the murder of Octavius and attempted murder of the other victim. However, before he even received his sentence, just 38 minutes later, he walked out of jail because of a serious and avoidable mistake that allowed his release. But to understand what that mistake was, we have to go back to the very beginning. This is the life and death of Octavius Atkins and how his murderer was released by the police themselves. Octavius LaShun Atkins was born on October 24, 1992, in Memphis, Tennessee. He came into the world in a city known for its music, its culture, and its deep sense of community. Memphis is a place where neighborhoods remember their own, where families grow up just a few streets apart, and where names carry history. Octavius was one of those names. To the people who knew him personally, he was not a headline or a court case. He was someone's son, someone's friend, someone who had grown up in the same streets that shaped so many others in Whitehaven. He spent his life in Memphis, rooted in the city that raised him. While not much detailed information has been publicly shared about his childhood, school years, or career, the people close to him described him as a young man who mattered deeply to those around him. In a world where some lives are reduced to a single moment, his family saw something fuller. They saw a person with personality, with humor, with presence. They saw a man who was part of their daily lives, someone who showed up to family gatherings, who shared memories and conversations that will now never be repeated. But despite that love, there is still a quiet mystery around who Octavius truly was outside of the tragic moment that brought his name into the public eye. Not much is really known about him outside of the news reports of the crime and the horrors it would eventually inflict. Very little focuses on him, and that silence leaves space where only his family truly knows the full story of the person he was. And yet, as ordinary as his life may have seemed from the outside, it would eventually collide with something far more violent. Because at some point, his path crossed with Anthony Green. At the time, nothing about Anthony Green publicly suggested that he was dangerous. He was only 19 years old, legally an adult, but still in the early stages of life. However, there is very little publicly available information about his upbringing, his schooling, or what his daily life looked like before that summer that changed everything. What is known is that he was from the Memphis area. Like Octavius, he grew up in the same city that has shaped generations of young men navigating opportunity, pressure, loyalty, and survival all at once. But there was something about Anthony that stands out. In some circles, Anthony was connected to the local rap scene. He was not a famous rapper, he was not a big name in the music industry, but he was known to be around people who were involved in music. In Memphis, being close to that world can mean a lot. Reputation spreads fast, names become known quickly, and sometimes that visibility can bring attention, both good and bad. But being around music does not explain what happened next, and this is where the story becomes harder to understand. Because even now, years later, it is still not clear what kind of connection existed between Anthony Green and Octavius Atkins. There has been no clear public explanation of whether they knew each other personally. There has been no confirmed report of a long-standing feud, no detailed account of a heated argument that led up to that night. No clear narrative of how they were connected at all has been fully laid out in simple terms. And that uncertainty makes what happened next even more disturbing. On the evening of June 19, 2020, everything changed. That night, Octavius was inside a vehicle at the intersection of Shelby Drive and Neely Road in Memphis, Tennessee. Nearby, at the same traffic light, a separate vehicle was also stopped, driven by a 49-year-old man. Both cars were waiting in traffic like everyone else at the intersection. It was a normal stop at a light. Nothing unusual was happening at that moment until the unthinkable happened. Then, a white Mercedes SUV pulled up near the vehicles that were stopped, and without warning, the unthinkable happened. Gunfire erupted from the SUV towards the cars at the intersection. Multiple shots were fired. Bullets struck the vehicle where Octavius was sitting. He was hit several times. The 49-year-old man inside the car was also shot. Drivers nearby reacted immediately. Some tried to duck down inside their cars. Others attempted to move out of the way as soon as there was space. The intersection quickly turned into a scene of panic and confusion. Inside the vehicle, Octavius had been critically wounded. The shooting lasted only moments. After the shots were fired, the white Mercedes SUV left the area. When the gunfire stopped, Octavius LaShun Atkins, 27 years old, had been fatally shot at the intersection of Shelby Drive and Neely Road in Memphis, Tennessee. The events of that night unfolded in seconds. It wasn't long until help were called to the crime scene, but by the time the emergency services and the police arrived, the SUV was already gone. Memphis police officers arrived to find the intersection frozen in shock. Shell casings were located in the roadway. The vehicle where Octavius was sitting in showed visible bullet damage. Paramedics began treating both victims at the scene. Octavius was transported for medical treatment, but the injuries were severe and he unfortunately did not survive. Meanwhile, the 49-year-old man, though wounded, survived the shooting. And just like that, what had been an ordinary stop at a traffic light became a homicide investigation. Police focused first on the vehicle. Multiple witnesses described the same thing. A white Mercedes SUV pulled up beside the stopped cars and opened fire. That detail stayed consistent from the beginning. Officers began checking nearby cameras. They pulled footage from traffic cameras and businesses in the area. Video placed a white Mercedes SUV right before the shots were fired. That vehicle became the center of the case. Investigators worked to identify who owned it and who had access to it. The white Mercedes was traced back to Anthony Green. As police continued digging, they found another key piece of evidence. The white Mercedes SUV used in the shooting was later burned behind a nearby building. The fire appeared to be an attempt to destroy evidence, but the vehicle had already been identified and tied to the case. That discovery tightened the focus. With witness statements placing the white SUV at the intersection, surveillance footage showing it near the scene, and the connection between the vehicle and Anthony Green, the case moved forward. And then, formal charges followed. On March 19, 2021, a Shelby County grand jury indicted 19-year-old Anthony Green. He was charged with first-degree murder and the death of Octavius LaShun Atkins, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of employment of a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. But there was one problem. Green was not in custody. Months passed after the indictment. The warrant remained active. Then, on September 26, 2021, another development shifted the case. A Mississippi Highway Patrol officer conducted a traffic stop on Interstate 10 near Gulfport, Mississippi. Anthony Green was inside the vehicle. Because there was an active murder warrant from Shelby County, he was taken into custody during that stop. And with that arrest, the case returned to Tennessee. Green was transported back to Shelby County to face the charges tied to the shooting. The case remained active for years as it moved through court, and he was scheduled for a trial. And even though he was in custody, the road to justice would not be easily obtained, because it wasn't until 4 years later when he faced the jury. On September 21, 2025, Anthony Green stood before a jury in Shelby County. More than 5 years had passed since the shooting at Shelby Drive and Neely Road. Now, the case was finally in the hands of 12 jurors. The state laid out its argument clearly. Prosecutors told the jury this was not an accident and it was not self-defense. They argued that Green pulled up in a white Mercedes SUV, stopped near 2 vehicles that were already waiting at a red light, and opened fire without warning. There was no fight happening at the intersection. No one was chasing him. No one was attacking him. The shots came from his vehicle towards Octavius's car, and that is what made it murder. Under Tennessee law, first-degree murder includes a killing that is intentional and premeditated. The state argued that driving up to a stopped car and firing multiple rounds showed deliberate action. Green did not fire a single stray shot. He fired several times into a vehicle where people were sitting, and that act of pulling up and firing into stopped cars demonstrated intent. But what happened next would shock everyone. On September 24, 2025, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Anthony Green was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Octavius Atkins. Along with that conviction, he was also found guilty on the related firearm charges tied to the shooting with a $500,000 bond. And he was supposed to remain in custody while waiting for sentencing. That verdict brought a moment of relief for the Atkins family, who had waited years for accountability in the case. After 5 years of waiting, they believed the legal fight was finally over. They believed the man responsible for Octavius's death would remain in custody until sentencing. But then, everything shifted again. Just 3 days later, on September 27, 2025, a serious mistake happened.
Now, the same week that Sheriff Floyd Bonner announced that the county jail is emptying beds, a convicted murderer is now walking the streets. Now, the Sheriff's Department is in damage control after releasing the man and putting the blame on another government office. Anthony Green was released from jail after he made a $2,500 bond for a theft charge. Now, this happened despite being convicted of murder in an unrelated case. Green already had his $500,000 bond for that murder charge revoked. The sheriff's office initially claimed that Green was released because the criminal court clerk failed to deliver the proper paperwork, but has since determined that a deputy, quote, failed to adhere to established protocols. The sheriff's office has since apologized to the criminal court clerk's office. They plan to take immediate steps to rectify the situation and keep it from happening again. But at last check, a warrant has now been issued for Green. The charges on that warrant include first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder.
Because of a paperwork error tied to a separate theft charge, Green had been allowed to post a $2,500 bond.
At 10, a convicted killer accidentally released from jail. And now the Shelby County Sheriff's Office needs your help to find him. SCSO says a warrant has been issued for this man, 24-year-old Anthony Green. A processing delay allowed him to be freed from 201 Poplar. Court records show Green was convicted in a 2020 murder case this week. As a result, his $500,000 bond was revoked. He was supposed to stay in jail awaiting sentencing. But SCSO says the jail didn't receive that information from the court, and he was let out Wednesday after posting a $2,500 bond for another misdemeanor theft case he was involved in. Action News 5 talked with his attorney, Brandon Hall, tonight.
So he was processed out almost immediately after trial. The judge did everything she was supposed to do. She revoked the bond at the end of the trial, as any judge would do. The clerk in the courtroom placed a hold upon my client, and then the jail released him. Now, what happened in between, I don't know. I can't say. All I can say is that he was released.
Green's warrant charges him with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and employment of a firearm with the intent to commit a dangerous felony. If you see him, you are asked to call the authorities immediately.
You might need a flow chart to keep up with this next story, but I'll try my best to break it down. A man convicted on first-degree murder charges is inadvertently released from the Shelby County Jail. You see, Anthony Green was found guilty in a jury trial yesterday for the shooting death of a man in Whitehaven 5 years ago, convicted. While he was out on bond for murder, he was arrested on a misdemeanor charge. And after the murder trial, for some reason, the misdemeanor was the only charge that came up, and he was released on bond. After the error was found, a warrant was issued for Green's arrest on the murder conviction, but he's still at large.
The system had not been fully updated to reflect that his $500,000 bond on the murder conviction had been revoked, and that gap in the records allowed him to walk out.
A convicted killer on the run after being accidentally released from the Shelby County Jail. Anthony Green was convicted of first-degree murder yesterday for the killing of Octavius Atkins in 2020. 38 minutes later, he walked out of the courthouse at 201 Poplar a free man. His attorney tells Fox 13 it was due to a clerical error. Now he's on the run. There's a new warrant out for his arrest. Fox 13 just spoke to the victim, Atkins' loved ones, in an exclusive interview.
It's ridiculous that He came out free after being convicted of a murder.
A clerical error, you don't make those mishaps on a murder. I don't know if he want to retaliate. I don't know. These are things I don't know.
And since Green was voluntarily released, he's not facing any additional charges right now. He will serve life in prison once he is captured. Fox 13 also spoke to his attorney. You can hear what he had to say about the situation right now on our website and our news app.
In just 38 minutes, Anthony Green walked out of jail, even though he had just been convicted of first-degree murder. When Octavius Atkins' family learned about the release, they were shocked. After 5 years of waiting, they believed the legal fight was finally over. They believed the man responsible for Octavius' death would remain in custody until sentencing. And that is when the family's relief turned back into fear. They had already endured the trial. They had already relived the shooting through witness testimony and video evidence. Hearing that he had briefly been released reopened wounds that had not even begun to close. Family members spoke publicly about their anger and disbelief. They questioned how a person convicted of first-degree murder could be processed for release at all. They said the system failed them in a way that felt personal. Relatives said they were afraid of what could happen next. They did not know if he might try to retaliate. They did not know if he might attempt to contact anyone connected to the case. They did not know if he would try to leave the area. That uncertainty made the situation even harder to accept. One family member expressed fear openly, saying they did not know what he might do now that he had walked out. The thought that someone just convicted of murder could be outside, even briefly, created anxiety inside their own homes. They had already lost Octavius on June 19, 2020. Now they were dealing with the possibility that the system could put them back in harm's way.
Growing concern tonight for a victim's family as the search continues for a convicted killer who was mistakenly released from the Shelby County Jail. WREG's Raven Copeland spoke to a member of their family as they wait for justice yet again.
So for her to go and actually think that she's about to get justice, only for her to get home and say he's been released, that's a lot.
Shakita Williams is describing the heartbreak of her cousin, who thought she had finally received justice for her son, who was murdered in 2020. Memphis police say Octavius Atkins was in a car near Shelby Drive and Neely Road when another driver pulled up and fired shots, killing Atkins and injuring another passenger. The gunman, Anthony Green, was arrested in 2021 and convicted on September 24, 2025. Unfortunately, relief for the victim's family only lasted a few minutes. The Shelby County Sheriff's Office says a deputy failed to revoke all bonds for Green and mistakenly released him after he posted a $2,500 bond for a misdemeanor theft case.
Once you find that you can breathe a little bit to just get the wind sucked out of you again, yeah, that's something I can't put into words for you.
It was just this week that a similar mistake happened. The sheriff's office says an IT error resulted in the release of convicted rapist Cameron Brooks, who turned himself in the next day.
It's careless and it's reckless, and you're not only putting the people that they harmed at stake, you're putting everybody else in harm's way at this point. I would hate for another family to have to bury somebody that they loved because our system failed us.
The family is holding on to faith as the search continues for the convicted killer who took the life of their loved one. Reporting from 201 Poplar, for your news leader, Raven Copeland, WREG News Channel 3.
A tense situation there, and the Shelby County Sheriff's Office says its fugitive unit and U.S. Marshals are helping to search for Anthony Green.
News of the mistaken release spread across Memphis. Many residents expressed concern about how jail records are updated after convictions. Questions were raised about internal procedures and oversight. The timing made it worse. Earlier that same week, Sheriff Floyd Bonner had announced efforts to reduce jail overcrowding, and another man who was convicted of a charge related to assault was also released accidentally. Now, residents were hearing that a man convicted of first-degree murder was no longer in custody, and the sheriff's office had to respond. At first, officials stated that the release happened because the criminal court clerk's office failed to deliver the proper paperwork reflecting the revoked $500,000 bond. That explanation suggested the error came from outside the jail. But then the narrative shifted. After further review, the sheriff's office acknowledged that a deputy had failed to follow established internal procedures. In other words, the mistake didn't happen because paperwork never arrived. It happened because the proper checks were not completed before Green was processed out. The office publicly apologized to the criminal court clerk's office and accepted responsibility for the breakdown. But for the Atkins family, policy discussions were not the focus. They were thinking about one thing. The man convicted of killing Octavius had walked out of jail. And that is when another move was made. A new warrant was issued for Anthony Green. The warrant listed first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. Deputies in the sheriff's office confirmed that their fugitive unit was involved. Federal authorities, including U.S. Marshals, were also notified to assist in locating him. His name was circulated again. His photo was shared. The message was clear. He was wanted. And yet, the hours turned into days. Then days turned into weeks. And as of now, Anthony Green remains at large. There has been no confirmed public update that he has been taken back into custody. The warrant is still active. Law enforcement agencies continue searching. For the Atkins family, that reality changes everything. Instead of preparing for sentencing, they are waiting again. Instead of closure, they are watching the news. Instead of focusing on healing, they are wondering where he is. And that is where this case stands today. A man was convicted of first-degree murder on September 24, 2025. 3 days later, he walked out of jail because of a mistake. A new warrant was issued, a search began. And as of now, the man convicted of killing Octavius Lashen Atkins has not been brought back into custody. But justice in this case is still unfinished. If you have any information about Anthony Green's whereabouts, authorities are asking you to come forward. You can contact the Shelby County Sheriff's Office directly. You can also reach out to Memphis Crime Stoppers. Tips can be submitted anonymously, and in some cases, a reward may be offered for information that leads to an arrest. Because for the Atkins family, this is not just a headline. It is their son, their cousin, their loved one. And until Anthony Green is back in custody, this case is not closed. What do you think about it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.